Karen Corda. Minister, I've been calling for a hybrid leaving cert for this year's cohort of sixth-year students since last July. I raised it with you in the Chamber last July, I raised it in the Education Committee last July, on the basis of what these students had missed out in fifth year. But I have to say, Minister, I don't believe you're the problem. And in fact, I believe you have always acted correctly when it comes to the leaving cert. In 2020, when you inherited the assessed grade system from your predecessor, Joe McHugh, we in the Labour Party encouraged you to delete the school profiling element of Leaving Cert 2020, and you did. And you did it for the right reasons, and quite a number of students got a fairer Leaving Cert as a result. Last year, again, we appealed to you to listen to the students because of what was happening 12 months ago. And again, you did the exact right thing. When others were walking away from the table, you were encouraged by the advocacy of the students who were at the heart of that campaign for a hybrid leaving cert. You found a solution and you delivered it, and I was the first to congratulate you on that occasion. And again, Minister, now you have the opportunity to stand up in the face of those who sound like Shirley Valentine's husband Joe, who say that we have always had steak on Thursday when it comes to the leaving cert. I don't understand why so many voices in education are so welded, so married to the traditional leaving cert. What's so glorious about it? We currently, as you know, in the Education Committee are listening to testimony after testimony about the leaving cert as it currently stands and why it needs to be radically overhauled, why it needs to be radically reformed, how it's completely out of date, how it hasn't really changed since I did it or from the 80s when people older than me did it, that it's effectively the same, that it is still far too much of a burden on young people at the end of their senior cycle, how it doesn't really reflect the abilities of young people as they go into the next stage of their lives, that what they're asked to be assessed on and how they are assessed is completely out of date. So all these things are effectively being accepted by anybody who has an objective look at the leaving cert. It's brutal, it's cruel, it may be transparent, and fair in inverted commas, but it is very unfair for anybody who's ever had to go through it. I'm quite sure if you ask any Irish person, do they still have nightmares about their leaving cert, they will absolutely say yes. And they know what subject gave them nightmares. For me, it was biology. Anyway, so even now with this national conversation, this national education conversation happening about the leaving cert being unfair, can you imagine what it's like doing this unbelievably unfair and brutal process, the senior cycle, and then added into the mix that you're doing it in the middle of a pandemic, when you've missed a load of months in fifth year, and then since October, effectively, you've been facing teachers being out because they're sick, students being out because they're sick, and no guarantee that that's going to change anywhere between now and June. Now, others have mentioned the advocacy of the ISSU, and I think the ISSU have been incredibly central to the change in education, the way it's being talked about, because, Minister, as you know, far too often in education we've heard from everybody else except from the student, from the young person, or the child. We've heard from all these other people, we always have steak on Thursday type remarks, that are absolutely married, absolutely welded to the system that they cannot move away from, that they are absolutely rigid. Voices that rejected or were resistant to change in the junior cert a number of years ago. Voices who are still now resistant to change in the leaving cert. And I have to say, and I'll say it here on this, in this chamber as a Labour Party politician, I am disappointed in the response of the teacher unions to this debate. I think they could be more imaginative. I think they could be more responsive to the needs of their students, because they must know, as they advocated for schools not to open a number of weeks ago because they said that the teacher personnel wouldn't be available to keep the schools open, they must realise that if the teacher personnel wasn't there to keep schools open, then surely the teacher personnel can't be there to properly empower their students and instruct their students and teach their students between now and June time. Now, I know of all the arguments that have been put forward about the lack of data from the junior cert, even though the majority of students actually have done a junior cert. I know all these arguments about grade inflation. I understand that the pressures that the third level institutions are saying. But if we are genuinely trying to put the student at the heart of discussion, then we can always find solutions around these things and stop problematizing all the time. We can find solutions as we did last year, as we did in 2020. How many debates do we have in these houses, in committee rooms, in this chamber, in the Shannon, in Irish society, about the mental health of young people? We have these exhaustive debates about the mental health of young people, about the stresses on young people, about the burdens of living in modern society are so acute on young people's shoulders. And yet, when it comes to the Leaving Cert, which is probably the most stressful thing they'll ever do in their young lives, they're doing it in the middle of a pandemic when they're worried about their relations, older people, possibly themselves as well, their health, the effects of COVID could have. They've gone through all that. They've missed out on in-school learning. They had to do remote learning. If they're in a disadvantaged situation, that is doubly compounded in terms of disadvantage. They're now facing a situation they're unsure about their teachers being in. They have all this certainty about the Leaving Cert. And we are going to say, in a mental health response to that, I know, sure, we have to go back to the traditional Leaving Cert. Sure, we always have steak on Thursdays. So what I would say to those voices in education is to try and just broaden the perspective on what we're trying to achieve here. This isn't a quick fix. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do. And I'm quite sure, Minister, that you have your own viewpoint on this, but you want to make a comprehensive announcement. Because there isn't really any point of you as Minister to stand up that you believe in the hybrid model, and then for all the questions to be asked of you, and for the answers not to be readily available. So I absolutely accept that. You need to have the teacher unions on board if you're going to pursue a hybrid model. You need to be able to answer the questions about grade inflation. You need to be able to answer the questions about places in further education, places in third level education. Absolutely accept that. We did a petition online, Minister, and you'll know that between students and teachers and parents, we got almost 10,000 names. You'll know exactly what the ISSU have done, taking the time to survey their members, and 68% of their cohort who are due to sit the Leaving Cert are advocating for a hybrid model. And you know what the Ombudsman for Children has said. The Ombudsman for Children, whose job it is to assess the situation even-handedly and independently, to see what is best for young people, many of whom are technically still children, and to assess from his perspective, from his office's perspective, what is best for them. And in this pandemic, in this time of national crisis, it is his office's perspective that the best thing for students, the best thing for the system is a hybrid model, as also was the perspective of the National Association of Parents, of Principals and Deputy Principals. So with all that, Minister, I accept that this is not a quick and easy decision. I would suggest it probably should have been made before now. If we'd had this decision in November, perhaps if you'd listened to me in July, we could have been well along the way to making a decision. But Minister, I repeat what I said at the beginning. You have always made the right decision. And whatever criticisms I have or the opposition have about your department or yourself as Minister, and we've had robust exchanges in this House. But I have to say I will be steadfast in my view that you as Minister have always done the right thing by Leaving Cert students and by Junior Cert students. You inherited an unfair mess in 2020 and you changed it, you justifiably changed it, and I think you changed lives in the way that you approached that. Last year, as I say, when others were walking away from the table, you listened to those who were still there advocating for the student voice, and you made the right change. And you have the exact same opportunity this year, Minister, to listen to those who are putting students at the heart of the discussion, who want what's best for them in this most anxious and uncertain time, to deliver to them what they need, a hybrid Leaving Cert examination. I do believe that's the decision you want to make. And if you do make that decision, Minister, we, as a Labour Party, and I believe other parties in this House, will work with you as closely as we can to make it a success. So with that, Minister, we urge you to conclude your deliberations as soon as you possibly can, and to make an announcement, if you can this week, that the Leaving Cert students who have been advocating so brilliantly in writing emails and advocating to their local representatives, will actually get what they are campaigning for, the fairest results, a hybrid Leaving Cert 2022.